Welcome to Your American Dream. I'm Anisha Jennings, and today we're having a very special episode with Shivani Honwad. Thank you so much for being here, Shivani.
Of course. Happy to make this
So,
work.
yes, thank you. So, this episode is going to be a little different compared to other episodes because we're having Shivani bring in her expertise as an immigration lawyer and also shed light on the situation that is going on currently and the scare that people are going through. So, she's going to answer some questions for us and she's going to shed light on what it is with the current situation with visas and applications and green cards and talk to us about that. So thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you.
Um, so when I was introduced to Shivani and I was asking her, maybe I got to know a little bit more about you. And she's like, you're going to find my bio. You can go read about me. My life is mostly public. So that goes to show that she wants to help others. Her first thing was, you can find things about me public. Things are there. You can go read up on it and you'll know more about me. But I really want to answer people's questions and remove the scare. So that goes to show how her heart is and how much she just wants to help people. So, Shivani, here, without further ado, please introduce yourself and let's get started.
Sure. So I am an immigration attorney. I also do contracts and IP, but for purposes of this podcast, I'm going to focus on the immigration side of my practice. I've had my own law firm for over 10 years now, and a lot of what I do is business-based immigration. And so that's like the H-1B visas, the TN visas, the E3 visas for Australian nationals. And what I really specialize in is the O1 visa, the O1A, O1B, and the EB1 green card. And so there's a nice pathway too for O1 individuals who are on those visas to transition to the EB1 green card, where you can actually self-petition for a green card. And it has faster processing times than some of the perm cases for EB2 or EB3 for nationals of India, Mexico, China, and the Philippines.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, we were talking about the H-1B visa. So, can you tell us more about what are some potential alternatives to the H-1B visa and how to go about it?
Sure. Okay, so the problem with the H-1B visa is like really a great visa. The problem is the cap. So every year they run a lottery and, you only a certain amount get through. And then, if you have a master's degree, you kind of have a little bit of a better shot. I don't know if the statistics are out yet on this year, but I think last year it was 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 made it. So it's not great odds. It's not nothing. We had some that made it through this year, but some didn't. So we had backup plans in place. And some of those backup plans are the O1 visa, actually. And so a lot of people think that the O1 is only for creatives and the arts. And while that's true, models, photographers, creative directors, they all come in on the O1 visa. For people in like marketing and tech fields, you can actually qualify for the O1 as well if you do a couple things. So it's a little bit more labor intensive if you're coming in under like tech and business. But for people like in marketing, you could possibly come under the arts category as like a creative director in marketing, depending on what your career is and what kinds of projects you work on. So you may want to look into that. But the key thing either way is you want to get press. So like when a USCIS officer Googles your name, they see your name and they see it affiliated with your field of work. So, if there's a press release coming out, like you're working on a project or a new tech product is launching, talk to your bosses, talk to your company about saying, can I just have one quote in that article? So that, like, again, like if it's a Forbes article, TechCrunch, Adweek, things like that, you can come off as like seeming as an expert in having that line affiliated with a popular publication. So getting press is really big. Creating opportunities for yourself to speak at things like conferences. If you're in tech, hackathons are great because you can judge those hackathons and like get your name out there, giving guest lectures. All of those things are kind of ways for you to enhance your profile and start building a viable case for potentially doing the O1 visa. Other options is if you're from Canada or Mexico, you should look at the TN visa. You do need a degree or a certain amount of experience, depending on what your field is there. The E3, if you're Australian, is obviously really great. And then the other option, of course, is like we talked about the EB1 green card, but that requires a certain level of experience. So if you're at the beginning of your career, it might be difficult to kind of make that work.
Got it. Got it. Thank you so much for sharing that. So for the EB1 visa, what would be like a few of the qualifying points so people can consider it?
Yeah, so the EB1 is actually a green card application, not a visa. So it's a path to permanent residency in the US. So it's like EB2 and EB3, your employer sponsors them and it goes through that whole perm process and it's kind of, extensive process. But EB1, you can skip the perm process if you meet certain criteria. So there's EB1A for extraordinary ability, EB1B for outstanding researchers or professors, and EB1C for multi-level executives. So typically, if you have an L1 visa, which is another visa we didn't mention, but it's a visa for people that have worked for a company abroad that has an affiliated company in the US. So, depending on that relationship, you may also qualify for an EB1C um, pathway to a green card. So, the EB1A, you need to meet certain criteria. And so for that, like again, the press is part of that, having a high salary. And for that, people often get tripped up with that because the salary is judged based on the average amount paid to people in your field. But the cities play into it too. So for a tech worker in San Francisco, the salary needs to be pretty high. But a tech worker in like Lincoln, Nebraska, you might have a lower salary, but still meet the high salary requirement. So I feel like when a lot of people come to me to talk about this, they self-select and just count themselves out, saying, oh, I only make this much. But you're looking at the average and you're looking at where you're based. So you may count. So don't count yourself out. Like just, when you're talking to a lawyer about this, bring up everything because you never know where you might qualify and you only need to meet three of the categories. So it's like I said, so awards is one, membership in a group. So the membership is like a group that you were invited into because you were so talented or skilled, not necessarily something like that you can pay to play. So if like you just pay $200 and everyone can be a member, that doesn't count. But for example, I have a client that's a very talented artist and was invited to join the British Royal Sculptors, I forget what the official name is, but it's British Royal Sculptors, I think, Association or something. And so he's part of that. So like that counts as membership. Because only the top people in that field kind of get to count. So publications, so press. So again, those quotes in different publications is one. Authorship. So if you've written a paper about your work and published it, so I do encourage a lot of my clients because it can help for the visa, it can help for the green card application, and it can help you just get better opportunities to get your name out there and build your career for yourself. So write about what you do and just submit it places. You never know where things are going to get published. Like in this day and age, publications need so much content because it's not just in print, like print's even dying, but like there's so much online. So they constantly need people's content. So if you do something a little bit unique and like have a great way of talking about it, you can get out there, get published, and then you can actually build a whole other career for yourself just speaking. And then that builds your portfolio to build a stronger immigration application for you as well. So there's no real downside to that. Um, the other things are what's called original contribution in your field. So that can, if you have a patent, that's an automatic qualifier. So if you're working on something for a company, ask to be named on the patent. I mean, the worst case scenario, your company says no. Best case scenario, they say yes, and then you're on there, and then you can use that as evidence. So just make the ask. And then other original contributions is if you like really did something really unique, like you launched a product or a campaign that had like millions of hits or something like that, you can talk about that of how, your idea was so novel and it really had a huge impact. So leader critical role is another one at organizations of distinguished reputation. So that's if you're working at like a company that's well known or in the press or something, and you have like led a team, led a key project, or developed something yourself. That's how you qualify for that one. And then art, if you're in the arts, it's exhibitions at artistic showcases is one. So like if you are a photographer and your work was shown at a gallery, that can count. And then finally, like we talked about the pay and having high salary.
Perfect. Thank you for shedding light on that. So what about, on the H-1B visa, because you have to be working in the area that you're specialized in, like your degree is in. Can they be entrepreneurs? Can they start a business? What does that look like? Are they allowed to start a business, or how can they go about that?
Yeah, so there's actually some changes that were made to the international entrepreneur rule. And so they can file through that. And there are some nuances to it in like how you have capital. So I would recommend kind of running a business plan by a lawyer to see if you qualify. But just like I'm actually going to read it so I don't actually mess this part up. But the applicant must have at least 10% ownership of the company. So you can have co-founders that are US citizens or other immigrants too, but you have to have 10% at least. You can have higher, you can have 50%, you can have 100%, but minimum is 10%. You must have what they call a central and active role in the startup. So you can't just be the person that's passive and like kind of checks in like once a month. You have to actually be actively working on this company. Like this is what you're doing daily kind of thing. The entity must be new. So it must be formed, like it must be a startup formed in the US in the last 5 years. So it can't be like, this company's been around for 20 years and you're working there. That won't qualify because that's not necessarily an entrepreneurial pursuit. It's kind of those startups and newer things. Um, you can't it so you have to kind of show this potential for rapid growth and job creation. And then finally, you need to show that you have a qualified investor. So you have someone kind of willing to back your startup and your entrepreneurial pursuit, but this can't be your family. So it can't be you. You can't just be like, okay, I'm going to put my own money in. And it can't be like, okay, my dad's giving me this money. It has to be a qualified investor. So the point of that is to show that your idea has some legs, that it's not some like half thought out thing just so you can stay in the country and like, work the immigration system. This is to show like, okay, other people in the US believe in your idea and we want to give you a shot to see if you can make this work. So those are the three things. The applicant must have 10% ownership and a central and active role. The entity must be formed in the US within the past 5 years and must have a qualified investor. And as of October 1st, 2024, the minimum amount that investor needs to invest in the company is $311,071. So there is a potential though where you can use awards and grants for some of that investor funds. But that's the minimum. So it's over $300,000 is what you have to get. So it's not like you can again go in with like $10,000, like I'm trying to make this lean startup work. That won't count.
Got it. So freelancers doesn't count.
If
Will it
they're
count?
backed by an investor, they could count. I know it's such a lawyer answer, but like the answer is it depends. But I also want to say this to like, there are a lot of incubators out there, startup incubators and venture capital funds that do like friends and family rounds. So if you have an idea that you're trying for, apply for that. Like even if you're still in school or even if you're on your OPT or STEM OPT, because getting those funds could help you qualify for this international entrepreneur role. So just try applying because then you also get funding and then you get an immigration benefit. So it's kind of like a win-win scenario if it works out.
Perfect. So what about STEM extensions? Do you want to talk a little bit about STEM extensions, please?
Yeah, so check with your school because a lot of schools are actually expanding their STEM programs. So there's certain technicalities that like may not have qualified a couple years ago, but because with the advent of AI and how certain majors are adapting and using those courses in their majors and like the nuances of that, there are majors that are going to qualify now for STEM that historically may not have. So that's like a big thing that people will be like, oh, like I did this like marketing degree or something like that. It doesn't count because it's like
Mhm.
not it's business, right? But
Right.
like if it was data analytics and specialized in that and you had other like, research-based things that used tech, used AI, your school may have updated it to count as a STEM major because of the technicalities that are in the courses you had to take to fulfill that major.
Got it.
So it's not always like kind of advertised as openly, but
Mhm.
I would recommend that students, because it's like school based, obviously, but students should check with their schools because, when they entered the program, it may not have been a STEM OPT extension eligible program, but as they're getting their degree, it may have transferred over because of the courses they took and the shifts as they were in school of what they needed to do to fulfill the requirements.
Okay, got it. So they have to check with their home schools. Perfect. Um, so for immigrants who want to self-petition for a green card and not be tied to their employer, what would they need to know?
So those are kind of the EB1 categories that I just talked about a few minutes ago. But I mean, the key thing is you want to get press. Like that's the biggest thing I can tell people is just get your name out there on as many things tied to your field as possible. And I specify that of saying tied to your field because if it's like in something completely different, it's not going to help your case. So like if you're a software engineer and your hobby on the side is photography, and like you just had a random photography showcase, which is a showcase of your work technically, but if you're applying as a software engineer for your EB1, it doesn't work. So you want it to be like, software engineer based kind of exhibition. Like, I don't know if this is a thing, but like if your code is to, shown somewhere at some exhibit of like, hey, this is the Technical Hall of Fame or something, I don't know. That could work. But like, getting press about being a software engineer or saying something about those kinds of projects, like your salary in that field, writing about the work you do as a software engineer, all of that qualifies. But the photography thing, unless all of a sudden you turn your hobby into a huge career, getting paid really well for it, getting pressed for it, all of that, it would be a separate thing if like you're in the software engineering field. So that's why sometimes people will come to me and they're like, oh, I have press, but it's completely unrelated to their field. And I'm like, I mean, this is great, but it doesn't work.
Got it. Okay, so the next question is about the extension of status. What is the registration requirement and who has to do it?
So this just came out and a lot of I got a lot of panicked emails because it seemed like everyone kind of had to do it. And they do. However, I caveat this with saying that if you entered the country with a visa, green card, like legally, so basically like you were stopped at the airport, a port of entry, CBP saw your passport, marked you in, then you were already registered. So you wouldn't have to necessarily proactively do anything unless you move. So if you move, you need to fill out this form. It's called the AR11. You can find it online. Um, and like my suggestion is to do it as soon as possible because there's like a time limit on like when you're supposed to do it by, otherwise you could be fined. So do it like again, it'll take you like 2 minutes. You just write in your old address and your new address and you just say update. And so that's like how you're registered. But again, if you entered legally via port of entry, whether that's through the airport or a shipping area or land border crossing, you were registered. So for everyone that kind of panicked during that time, it was just kind of like, okay, you might like how did you enter? And it was all legal, you're fine. So if you entered without inspection, that's where you would need to proactively do that. And so, but like with the inspection, some things to keep in mind is so if you're doing your extension of status and your visa expires while your status change is kind of pending, you need to keep your receipt notice on you at all times to show that your extension of status was timely filed. And timely filed means before your current visa ran out. And the other new requirement is that they're requiring you to carry your I-94 with you. Because the I-94s were all electronics, they're not in your passport anymore. So for anyone that doesn't know how to obtain that, just Google CBP I-94 and you'll be taken to the CBP website and you just click on the button that says Get Most Recent I-94 and you'll just enter your information. So it'll just be like your birth date, name, passport information. And then your I-94 will come up and then just print it out. It'll just be one sheet of paper. You can just like fold it up, carry it in your wallet, your purse, whatever. But just having that on you is a good way of showing in case you're stopped anywhere or while you're traveling to show that you have legal valid status, were inspected upon entry, and are permitted to be in the US.
Got it. So, besides the I-94, is there anything else that non-US citizens should carry with them at all times? Like even if they have a green card, say the green card is expired and you have an extension letter, do you need to carry that with you at all times, or how does that work?
Yeah, we'd recommend carrying all of that with you. So I also do understand that some people get nervous carrying their passport with them everywhere. So my suggestion for that is carry a copy at least of it at the very least, on you. And so I recommend like a paper copy so you don't have to give someone your phone, but you can take a picture of it and have it on your phone. The thing with the phone is if you turn your phone over to someone that asked you for it, is they could technically search your phone. So you don't want to open yourself up to that liability to have your phone searched if you don't need to. And also just, be mindful, of course, of what you're posting if you're going to be entering and exiting the US, because a lot of CBP officers are requesting to check social media. So just, I'm not saying anything one way politically or another. I'm just saying be mindful of what you're posting, because that could invite you to further questioning. So, what I would suggest printing and carrying with you is like if you don't want to have your passport on you, at least the bio page of your passport to show that it's a valid passport. And it's showing if it's a visa that you have, then that visa copy. But if you have your green card, you should carry it like your driver's license, basically. So always kind of have that on you. Um, and then a receipt notice. So if you filed and had an approval notice or something like that, or if your new visa was approved and you haven't left the country to get your new visa and your passport yet, carry that approval notice with you because that's showing that you are permitted to stay because your I-94 wouldn't have been updated online. Um, but your I-94 would be on the bottom of that. Let's like usually the bottom right corner of that approval notice has your new I-94. So, and if you're worried about carrying the original, you can carry a copy of that on you. But I would suggest carrying all of that with you. I know it sounds like a lot, but I mean, you can also keep it in your car if it helps. But just having that easily accessible, especially while you're traveling, on planes, trains, what have you, in the event you're stopped for any reason, you can show really quickly, hey, I have legal status, here's everything.
Right. Thank you so much for that information because I know we carry all our, the green card or the documents that like a passport or ID, but carrying all these receipt notices and the I-94 is good information. Thank you so much for that. So, are there any updates for what documentation is required for ESTA or tourist visas?
Yeah, so they're being a little bit stricter on the ESTAs and the tourist visas for when you enter the US. So there's a chance you just show it and walk in and there's no issue. But I'm hearing a lot more people are being taken into secondary questioning or asked more questions before being admitted. So a couple things you should kind of just have on you as good practice going forward to avoid that situation is so when you come in as a tourist, you're not permitted to work in the US. So showing that you have adequate funds in a bank account that you won't need to get on a job or go on public benefits in the US would be really helpful. So just printing like the day before you travel, printing a copy of your bank account. And again, same thing as what I just said a few minutes ago, is print this stuff out and carry it with you rather than having to show over a screenshot on your phone. My suggestion is to avoid turning over your phone to anyone if possible. I don't think anyone really likes getting their phone searched by anyone. So it's not just for an officer thing. Like I don't even want my phone searched. But just to avoid that, handing over paperwork is easier. So the bank account showing that if you're coming in for like a conference or a meeting, all of that is like permitted via ESTA and you're not like working there or something like that, showing that you have, a home that you either own or rent in a foreign country. You can bring those just a copy of that, like being like, hey, here's my lease or here's my deed copy. I own this home. I'm not trying to live here. I'm literally coming for this one thing. So whatever those meetings or agendas are, showing the conference, like the purchase receipt of your conference ticket, things like that for like that can help show why you're here. So like if you're here for a wedding, like a friend's wedding, just have a copy of that wedding invite on you. Things like that to help show that you're not trying to either just overstay a visa and just kind of stay in the US or to illegally work in the US without proper work authorization. That's where kind of the questioning is coming for. So having these other documentation to show that one, you don't need to work, and two, the purpose of your visit, whether it's travel, tourism, or like I said, to attend a meeting, conference, things like that, just that extra degree of proof would really help speed things up for you.
Thank you so much for giving us that information. So, what if a U.S. A green card holder is traveling frequently abroad for work, fun, family, and they are out of the country for long periods of time? Do they need to do anything?
Yes. I recommend in that situation filing for what's called a reentry permit. And the reentry permit can be granted for up to 2 years. So current processing times actually for the reentry permit are 14 months. So what you can do though, and we did this for a few clients that were continually being stopped at the border because of their frequent travel or extended stays abroad, is just the filing of that and showing that receipt notice at the border saying, hey, I filed this, but because you can't file for premium processing for a reentry permit, so you can't speed it up. You just have to wait. So just that receipt notice is letting my clients just freely be able to enter without that extra secondary now. So the act of doing that is the first step, is my suggestion. And it just is like you just need to gather some documents to kind of prove what's taking you abroad. Like I have clients that work in entertainment, so they're shooting projects abroad, things like that. So we just kind of pull those contracts for their film shoots, productions, what have you. Their agents, managers sign off on like what they have upcoming. We submit that. For people that have family abroad, they might have a sick family member or something like that. We've done doctor's notes or affidavits from the sick family member to explain the situation. But it's basically to preserve your green card status because green card holders are required to be in the US for 180 days out of the year. So if your trips kind of take you out of that, or like I said, you're staying out of the US for like extended months at a time, it may flag that. So this is to preserve that so they don't say, okay, you didn't maintain green card status, we're revoking this now.
Makes sense. So what about the other question I had is like when parents or somebody comes to visit here and say they fall sick or fall ill and then they cannot make it back in the time frame that they were supposed to go. So I know you can file for extension, but you don't hear back from it. So what if they overstay their visit? What are they supposed to do in a situation like that?
So as soon as something like that happens, I recommend filing for the extension immediately. And when you do that extension, you would want to put in there as much information as you can about like the hardship that caused this situation. So like if it was like, a medical thing and they're getting treatment in the US and like their doctors are here and it's just like, they have a month left on their stay, but they might need to stay for 3 months because of rehab and all of that stuff, like physical therapy or what have you, put in all of that and, you can usually ask for like a max 6 month extension or so. So I would put all that in and say, like, here's what happened. We need the max time. And they may approve it for only 3 months, but at least you asked for the max time.
We're hearing of people being held in detention if they are deemed inadmissible in the US and not being allowed to just buy a flight back home. Is there a way to avoid this happening?
Yeah, so if especially if you're coming through Europe or via Europe, you may want to look through flying through Dublin, because Dublin does the pre-clearance in Dublin rather than stateside in the US. So that's one option. Also, like certain Canadian ports, like for example, Toronto's Pearson Airport, you do clearance there. So if you're deemed inadmissible, you just turn around and go back to Canada. So instead of having to enter the US and then being stuck in detention if you were deemed inadmissible, this way, like if you're inadmissible, they just don't even let you on the flight. So you don't have any issue. You just turn around and go back to Ireland, back to Canada, and then figure it out from there without being in detention. So if someone is nervous about flying or worried about that, I would recommend doing that and flying that way.
Got it. So I think this is a common question for most people who are waiting for their green card, who have applied through their employer and are waiting for their green card. It has been years. We talk of 20 years, 20 years, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. They don't even know. So what does that look like? What should they do? Like, do you just stay here? Do you go back? You are legal, but it's kind of you're in a limbo. You don't know, you don't belong either or. So what do they do in this situation?
So that's actually an area I specialize in. Is a lot of these nationals from like India, Mexico, China, and Philippines have these long wait periods. But you can, like I said earlier, you can self-petition for the EB1. So again, press is huge. talk about what you do, put it out there, like, make it known that you're an expert in this field. And that's where I would recommend self-petitioning for the EB1 so that you can skip that wait period. An EB1 isn't current for every category, but sometimes it does go current. So you just have to look at that, but you can actually port, if you filed for EB2 and are in that waiting period, you can port your date from the EB2 to the EB1, so you could be current by the time you filed the EB1. So that's a really great way to kind of have, like, instead of a 10-year wait period, a 2-year wait period, or something even faster, depending on when you filed everything.
Got it. There's also a little scare about, applying for tourist visas because they just are not getting any visa appointment dates, and it's just been so long to get any appointment. So, what does this look like, and what should people do who do want to come in legally and come in on a tourist visa?
So this is going to be annoying to say, or hear, I should say, but it's something that you can do is people cancel those appointments almost daily. And sometimes USCIS will just make more appointments available, like if another officer gets added or something like that. So a lot of times the way people get those appointments last minute is just refreshing throughout the day, almost daily. And that's how my clients have been successful. That's why I was like, I know it's a little bit annoying to kind of have to keep checking, but you never know when you'll get lucky because, like, someone could be sick or their plans change, so they cancel their appointment that day. So if you go on right when that's open, it'll be open for you. So just like kind of being persistent a little bit there, that's a way to do it for those tourist visas.
Got it. So, any last minute thoughts? Any other points you want to cover before we wrap up?
I know that there's a lot of fear, and I think that's really sad. And I'm hoping that, some of these responses here can help assuage some of that because I want people to continue living their lives. Like, I want people to continue going for their dreams, being successful in their careers, spending time with their loved ones, family, friends, showing up for weddings and all the other great things that happen, but without being scared about immigration. But talk to an immigration lawyer just to make sure, like, if there's anything you need to know or be mindful of, you're doing all that to make sure you maintain your status. Because I think trying to do things last minute, unfortunately, right now is a little bit hard with the filings of things. But if you plan for it a little bit, you can definitely still live life like a little bit more freely, than what the media might be making it out to seem. So I want to say that, like, instead of just being in fear and just watching the news and being on that doom scroll cycle, reach out, because everyone's case is a little bit different. So what might not work for your friend might actually work for you. So don't be afraid to ask those questions to an immigration lawyer and just, set up a consult and spend the time to, like, go through everything just to also give yourself hopefully peace of mind as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So, you did mention you have something coming up in the summer. Would you like to talk more about it, please?
Sure. So I am going to be launching a little course, like it's just a mini webinar thing you can do online for people who are interested in the EB1 green card petition for, you can self-petition. So it's like a little mini course that you can do to kind of see how you can build that out for yourself before applying.
Perfect. So, for our listeners, all this information will be in the show notes. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave it in the comments. And if anybody wants to reach out to Shivani, what would be the best way to reach out to you?
Sure. You can just go to my website. There's a contact form on there. It's just www.shivanilaw.com. And just fill that out, and then we can get back to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here today and helping us with all these questions and trying to ease our fears. So I
I
hope
hope
this
they
reaches,
helped.
I hope it helps. Yes, I hope this reaches out to a lot of people who are worried about their visas, the status, and all of it. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out. Shivani is here to help. As I mentioned in the beginning, she has a big heart and all she wants to do is help people. So please feel free to reach out. And thank you again, Shivani, for being here.
Thank you, Anisha. This was great.